Now we'd like to share the Word of God. Today's Word of God from the Old Testament, book of Psalm, number 37. So Psalm 37, verse 1 to 11. So you got your whole verse on one page on one side, or you have your PPT over here, or you might have your Bible together. So we'd like to read the Word of God, book of Psalm 37, verse 1 to 11. We'd like to read them all together slowly. Do not fret because those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither, like green plants, they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed. For those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for Him, there will be not found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. This is word of the Lord, and we'd like to share some grace. Today's title from the verse 7, Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Actually, in our children's program, we got a little activity regarding Independence Movement Day in Korea. Coming Friday is the public holiday in Korea because it's a very memorable day in modern Korean history, because in 1919, under the Japanese rule, the 1st of March, lots of Korean people, more than 2 million Korean people gathered together and they shouted their slogan for the independence of Korea. So we call it Independence Movement Day. So it's quite memorable actually, and because this year it's been about 7 years anniversary, so it's more meaningful. It's number 0 at the end. So it's 7 years anniversary of Independence Movement Day. The thing is actually there are lots of articles deal with those history. It's not so long ago, isn't it? Just 7 years ago. But the sad history still goes on. Why? Because there are some people who resist themselves as a resistance, kind of, for the independence of Korea. They fight with Japanese rule. Actually, those groups of people are there, and there are lots of bigger groups of betrayers. Even though they're Korean, but they don't treat themselves as Korean. So they try to stick to Japanese rule, and they try to get fame and money accordingly. So we got two groups, resistance groups and betrayers group. The problem is in Korean history, you got all things. If your grandfather betrayed Korea for Japan, then you could have a good life. You got fame and you got money, and it still goes on. So we got some survey, and lots of wealthy people in Korea actually. If you trace their forefathers, and you end up with all those betrayers, mostly because about 70 years ago, 80 years ago, they got their money and power from Japanese rule, and then they could use it again and again and again. They could educate their children well, and then they could have bigger land, which is the price which so up after 30 to 40 years, isn't it? So they're getting richer and they're getting more influential in this society. Those are betrayers group. But the resistance group, resistance, they're trying to fight for this land. The problem was, they risked their lives. Most of them would, be killed by Japanese rule, or they may be disabled. And then they have no money, and then they couldn't provide anything for their future generation, or they couldn't educate their children. In the end, they're getting poorer and then less educated people among our society. So the sad history still goes on. That is why lots of articles try to deal with this kind of imbalance, this kind of injustice. So that's why people say, oh, it's kind of a reverse fate. Even though they fight for Korea and Korea got the independence, but after some 70 more years, this was 100 years anniversary for the independence movement, and then 70 years anniversary for the independence, right? Because independence was achieved in 1945, so 7 years for that, and then 100, a centenary for the independence movement. But over a century, still we couldn't solve that injustice in our society. So a lot of people trying to argue, it's not fair, isn't it? Yes, it's not fair, so we have to correct it. But it's so hard to correct it, because still they got the power and the money, and then they got their own social status in a Korean society. So hard to change it all. So that's one of the typical example of our society, of our humane society, which is corrupted already ever since the fall of the man. So everywhere, it's not fair. In your workplace, or with your neighbors, and with your relatives, lots of unjust actions being done. So we would argue that it's not fair. Where is God? So we got typical argument, classical argument. If God is there, if God is good, how could all those unfairness in this world would happen? Where is God? Why God didn't do any of the action to justify all those, corrections, all those wrongdoings? Where is God? So that is why some of the, most liberate, people try to liberate themselves, and they will say, oh, there's no God, because there's no such action, isn't it? So today's passage actually would give us the glimpse of the solution towards that dilemma, which is, arguing, oh, this is not fair. It's not a fair society at all. So as a Christian, if there is God, then how could this be? So we'd like to have a look at it through King David's case. Because today's Psalm 37, written by King David himself. Of course, he wrote lots of other Psalms, Book of Psalms too, but especially with this one, he reflects his early stages in his life, which he treated mistakenly by his family, by his King Saul, isn't it? So he thought that was not fair, and then he tried to look for the reason, and he tried to look for the solution, and in the end, he got this great insight from God. That is how he wrote this beautiful poem by himself. So actually, it has about 40 verses altogether, but we don't have much time to read it through, so that is why we cut it, the very first part, very essence of this psalm, verse 1 to 11. Actually, if you see, Psalm 37, even with first two verses, you notice that they got certain system, because they have very interesting structure called alphabetic acrostic. Acrostic means, so you got two verses in parallel, and they devoted to each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. For example, verse 1 and 2 start with do not fret. It's in English, right? But in Hebrew alphabet, they start with like A. Like A is the first alphabet in English, right? So A for the first verse. And then third verse, B. Fifth verse, C. Goes like that. So that's what you call alphabetic acrostic. In the book of Psalm, the most typical was Psalm number 119, the longest one. And it has all the words A to Z, right? So this is one little example too. So it's beautiful to recite because it has all alphabetical order, of course in Hebrew sense. That is why in English you couldn't notice it, but at least you could notice, you could see the comparison between each verses. 1 and 2 is a set. 3 and 4 is a set. It goes on like that, right? So you bear that in mind. It's very interesting to see that acrostic with this. Especially 1 to 11 covers the main theme of this psalm. So we like to see what is the main theme. Actually, it talks about great comparison between the good and the bad. Good person and the bad person. And then, good person with wicked person. As, so on. So let's see here in verse 1. Actually, start with the command. So you could see that here, most of the part, David trying to use this commanding form. Why? Because David thought that these commandments are from God. So that is why he just put the commanding. Do not fret. Why? Because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. So in verse 1, David trying to warn us that do not be stressed. Here fret refers to you get stressed because of something. In this case, because of those who are evil. Remember like this, in Korean society, we saw some of the dictators of the past, or some of the betrayers of our nation of the past are kind of evil. And then we are so stressed. Why? Because this justice undone, and then they could have their good life there. So you think it's not fair. So God said, hey, don't be stressed because of those who are evil, or don't be envious. Do not envy about those who do wrong. I give you some of the idea. People like me and you got no money, and then got no car, and then you just hardly make your living day by day, isn't it? Most of the people, ordinary people. But if you think about people from Samsung family or Hyundai family, third or fourth generation, even though they are very young, like Tali's age, right? Still, they got billions of dollars of money under their name, just because they were born from that family. So we might think that this is not right, this is not fair, isn't it? And they're still doing something wrong by themselves to inherit their big money to their next generation. They do all the illegal things by themselves. So this is not right. And we could easily envy of those people, isn't it? Sometimes I wish I could be like Mr. Lee from Samsung family. I could demand all the money I want. Bring me some money, $2 billion, I want to use it. Then you could use it because you're rich, super rich. And then, a lot of people, they think it's not fair, somehow they are envy of those people. So here in verse 1, God said, don't get stressed because of something or somebody is evil. But that's how God said. Why? Then God directly gives us the reason in verse 2. Why? Because those people or those things, the evil or evil people are like the grass, God said, or like green plants. So grass and the green plants, they are almost the same thing here. And then what will happen to them? They will soon wither, or they will soon die away. Isn't it? The grass and green plants, they will soon disappear. So even though, in some moment of time, like springtime, it's like they're spring up and they blossom, and then you could see their beauty on the outside. But the thing is, soon they will wither and then they will die themselves away. So, which represents grass and the green plants as the temporary thing, and then they would not last forever. So what does it mean? God trying to point us that all those evil things or the evil person in this world are like grass or the green plants, and they're just temporarily possess their outward success by themselves. but soon they're going. When they die, of course, when they die, isn't it? That's what they mean physically. When they die, there would be a judgment by God upon them. So you might wonder that, yeah, 70 years after, 30 years after, it's a long time, God. But remember, God would like to tell us that for God, it's not a long time. Because God Himself created the time. So that's the mystery there. So for God, in other Bible writers said, compared to God's time scale, isn't it? Like, one day for God is like 1,000 years for humans, or vice versa. That's how, different is the time scale. So God said, they're like grass or the grand plants, they're gone soon, right? So you don't need to be stressed about all those people or all those evil things. You don't need to envy them. Okay, so that's the kind of first part. And then 3 and 4 are in pair 2. And when you see verse 3, they demand this. So number 1, in verse 1, do not fret. Number 2, in verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good. How simple, isn't it? God said, trust in me and do good. How simple could that be, isn't it? So, God directly saying that we must believe in God and do good in this world. Alright? By that, then we could dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Here, safe pasture, of course, refers to all the, environment which God given to us. So we could enjoy all the surrounding environment which has God given. So, if we trust in God and if we do something good. Alright? So, by this way, in verse 4, at the same token, when you see in verse 4, so it says, take delight in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. Now, this is great wisdom. It's like Book of Proverbs. Why? Because He said, it commands us to take delight in the Lord. So, we all look for something sweet, like chocolate or candy or cookies or whatever, which has lots of sugar and it gives us sweetness in our mouth. We look for it and we like to have it, isn't it? We like to taste it. The psalmist, David says, we must find some kind of delightness in the Lord. And if you could find it, how? Of course, through His words and through your meditation. And if you find it, then God will give us the desires of our heart. What does it mean? Here, if you could start, the desires of my heart, I want to be rich, I want to have a long life. That's my desire, isn't it? That's true, but that's your desire. But here, desires of your heart refers to the desire originated by God. So, what does it mean by these desires of your heart? If you stick with God, if you find this kind of delightness in God's words, then it will lead you to the right path, which God wants. Then, of course, holy life. That's what they mean. So, don't be confused. All the desires I wanted, that I want this and then, I want those. But God said, no, it's not what I desire. What I desire from you is as a right man, out of your original sin. Then you must be holy. So we try to pursue that holiness of God. That's what they mean. Alright? So anyway, take delight in the Lord. So trust in the Lord and take delight in the Lord. And furthermore, in verse 5, they like to suggest us that commit our way to the Lord and trust in Him, and He will do this. So commit our way to the Lord. Every living moment, we have a decision to make, or we have some kind of turning point in our lives. Whatever it is, when it comes, what do you have to do? We need to commit our way to God. That is why if you need to decide something important in your life, you must pray to God sincerely and with the enough time slot, right? By that way, God will give you sincere insight regarding God's path. you could understand it. So it's a mystery. God wouldn't say that, oh, take this, oh, number 1 and 2 option, take number 1 option. God wouldn't let you, His voice, listening to you saying that, oh, number 1 this time. Then that's very easy, isn't it? Very automatic, but God wouldn't do that way. Rather, God said, we need to commit ourselves to God. So, whenever you think, it's like, when you change your job, or when you change your residence, or when you, change your partner, or whatever it is, you try to come before God, and you try to communicate with God, and, ask Him, what should you do? Or which way should you go? Which direction should you take? We must commit ourselves to the Lord. And then David said, God would do this in verse 6. When you see verse 6, it's going to be like that. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, and then your vindication like the noonday sun. So here, you got beautiful comparison between righteous reward and vindication, and then dawn and the noonday sun. So, what's the common elements of those comparisons? Of course, here, when you commit yourself to God, and then God will reward you with your righteous decision. So maybe there would be the long and winding road, maybe there would be a straightened up and good road, but regardless of it, God will take you as righteous. How? Shine like the dawn. Remember dawn, just before the sunrise, you could see those brightness out of nowhere. That's what you call it. Or your vindication, like the noonday sun, when the sun is most hot. So here, vindication refers to your justification. So it means that God would justify your action. God would justify your decision same as God's, as long as you consult with Him beforehand. Right? That's what they mean here. And then how obvious? It would be obvious like noonday sun, and about 12 o'clock midday. So, how bright that could be. When God will assure you about His justification, about your decision and your action. Right? So far, do not be stressed and trust in the Lord and commit your way to the Lord so far. Okay? And then 7 sums up it. So when you see verse 7, we got one verse here. It's beautiful. David suggests us that we need to be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. How wonderful. We need to be still. Why? Because when you confront with God or the Word of God, you rather to have a good kind of attitude to listen to, rather than you trying to say what you wanted to say to God. So by that way, God would give you the insight, and God would give you kind of a knowledge of how you make your decision. Okay, that is why it's very important. Be still before the Lord. So that is why the nature of quiet time, the very first nature of your everyday quiet time, so-called QT, means be still. Very, very important, right? And then, of course, we have to wait patiently for Him. Until when? And there are 2 turning points in time. Number 1, the time of your death. So, sorry, but this is a fact. Until the time of your death, God would wait patiently for you. And we have to wait patiently for Him. Number 2 point is the time of final judgment. Regardless of, you die or not, but there is the end time in our human history. And then God is still waiting for every one of us to come to Him with this kind of patience. So that is why we must wait for Him patiently. It's very, very important. So, when you think about the very first idea, the world is not fair, and how long will this be? This is not a fair world. And where is God? Show us. Or come up to me, God, and do something or tell us something, isn't it? Until when? Well, actually, in our time slot, we like to seek for the answer soon and right now, isn't it? But God said, no, be still and wait. The time will come. So you must be still and wait for me patiently. Alright? And then along the way, God will give us this advice. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways and when they carry out their wicked scheme. So, same thing. You are a sincere believer for 30 years, 40 years, and then your life is vulnerable. You have no money in your account. And then you still have troublesome life by yourself. Then you might wonder, where is my God? Does this God ever care for me? You wonder, isn't it? So in those cases, God said, do not be stressed when other people succeed in their ways. In our church, we have very classical example. If you attempt for the entrance for the university in Korea, but through Sunung system in Korea, always, good news and tragedies come along, and somebody's son and daughter got what they want, getting into the good university, and the other sons or daughters, they fail to get an admittance, and then they have to do it again, do all the things again through Sunung system. So you might wonder, why? Well, actually, all those mysteries will be solved when the time comes. Until then, so God said, do not fret when people succeed in their own ways, or when some people carry out their wicked scheme. In these cases, think about your workplace. You are a good Christian, but you know that your boss is not a Christian, and then he's done something wrong by himself, isn't it? Financially or with political kind of sense, and they win. They won't win the case all the way through, and then you always on the other side, with the poor, empty-handed. Now, how could that be? Then you might get fret, and then you might stress yourself out. God said, don't do it, because they got their account due. So you don't need to worry about those wicked schemes of them, right? So as long as you're on God's side, you don't need to worry about all those wicked schemes outside of you, right? And then that they looks like they're being very, very successful in their own right. But God said they got their own due, and they must settle their account when the time comes. So you don't need to worry about it at all, right? So that's the kind of an idea, and God said, be still and wait patiently for Him. And then 8 and 9, more practical advice from God through David. God said, refrain from anger and turn from wrath. You must control your anger along the way. It's like same thing for me. This morning, just this morning in this church, I got some harsh, news, harsh information from some other elders regarding our, English service, and then there are lots of hypes around in this church, and suddenly, oh my goodness, how could this be, isn't it? So as a human being, it's kind of a human nature. You get angry. That's true. But God trying to advise us, hey, refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads you to only evil. This is very serious. This is serious business. Don't get too angry over anything. Then if you get too angry about yourself or about anything, then initially it would lead you to be that side, the evil side. So that is why it's very important to control your anger, and we must control ourselves with all those anger in this society, right? So you must be meek and mild and gentle in that sense. All right. So again and again in verse 9, it's got that combination. Those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. So it got very dramatic kind of comparison between all those people who are in evil side or in Lord's side. So we must make ourselves clear which side you belong to, evil side or the Lord's side. So think about it. When you get angry, am I in those evil side or the Lord's side? The answer is obvious, isn't it? That is why we need to control ourselves. When something makes us to be angry, then we have to control ourselves. We have to control our temper. Why? Because getting too much with this anger will put you to those evil sides. So we have to be very, very careful about it. But at the same time, we got to hope. Why? Because if you put your hope in the Lord, we will inherit the land. So we need to be very careful. We will inherit the land. What kind of land? Actually, new heaven and new earth is promised according to the book of Revelation, isn't it? After the final judgment. That's what they mean. So actually, both spiritually and physically, it would happen. And you would inherit the land that which God promised long time ago. Right? So until then, we need to control ourselves. So naturally, verse 10 and 11 is kind of a sub-conclusion about this little part. When you see verse 10, God gives us the reason why we should wait patiently for Him. And even though we thought that, long time has been passing, now God said, a little while, and the wicked will be no more. And though you look for them, they will not be found. So here the key is a little while. A little while, very short period of time, according to God. Remember, God, like 1,000 years for a human being, as a day to God. Same thing. Because God Himself is a creator of time, and then God will see all those years as very short time. So that is why, hey, a little while, wicked will be no more. So you don't need to worry about them. They're gone and diminished by themselves. Soon. But soon, according to God's time plan, right? Not our time. But that is why we're in a hurry. God, 50 years. God, after that Japanese rule, we got about 70 years now. Still, we want to unify between north and south. And then when, we're in a hurry, then God said, take time. Because in God's time slot, it's kind of a little while. So that is why we need to be patient about those time slots. And then, the letter in verse 11, it sounds like this. The meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. This is the ultimate promise made by God, isn't it? Here, the meek refers to somebody mild and gentle. So that is why I say, if you are a good Christian, you must be gentle, you must be mild, you must be meek. That's the very key character of being a faithful Christian. Why? Because God would ask that only the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity afterwards in the new heaven and new earth. How important is that? Even Jesus used the direct quotation in Matthew chapter 5 verse 5. So when you see Matthew chapter 5 verse 5 goes like that. This is famous beatitude, proclaimed by Jesus. And one of them goes like that. Blessed are the meek. The meek people, why? They will inherit the earth. Here, Jesus more obviously used the word the earth. Of course, earth refers to maybe generally land. But maybe the earth itself in those new heaven and new earth and that earth, right? So Jesus said, all those meek people, all those gentle and mild people will inherit the earth. That is why we must be mild and gentle, as much as possible, right? So even though Jesus trying to use that one here, right? And then, as I told you, the general conclusion of book of Psalm 37 lies with verse 39 and 40. So we like to sum it up with 39 and 40. 39 goes like that. The salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. So the source of salvation, of course, comes from God, and He is their stronghold in time of trouble. Please hold on to this promise. If you think you're in the time of trouble or time of unhappiness, try to think about this promise. And God is our stronghold. We must, grab Him very strongly, securely, because the ultimate salvation will come from Him. And then verse 40 goes like that. The Lord helps them and delivers them in the end, and He delivers them from the wicked and saves them, and because they take refuge in Him. So in order to be saved, we must take refuge in God. So whenever you are in trouble, I know that every now and then, every day, I'm in trouble. I couldn't sleep at night sometimes. And then, what do I do? Turn to God and pray to God. God, please, let me sleep. Oh God, please, I got this kind of prayer topic. Please listen to me. Isn't it? That's what you have to do. So, when you couldn't get to sleep, don't put yourself with, lots of alcohol or lots of other means. Rather, you need to turn to God. That's kind of God's calling for you. Hey, turn to me. You got troublesome life? Turn to me and then take refuge in me, that I will save you. Now, this is very important. You must take refuge when you have in trouble, whenever you are in trouble. Why? That's the kind of condition of your salvation. Oh, God said, I know that you take refuge in me. Okay, you totally depend upon me. I will save you. Don't worry. Isn't it? That's the kind of ultimate promise made by God. So, I'd like to sum it up. This world is corrupted. Yes, it's not the fair world at all. But remember, our God is fair. And then that is why we need to be still before Him and wait for Him for the day of the Lord. And it will come soon, of course, according to God. So we have to wait for Him patiently. And that's what we have to do. So please be in this group, and please be in this group of salvation. And that's the ultimate bless for you. I think you're in that lead. So get a hold on to it and then keep going, please. Okay? I'd like to offer a little prayer with ourselves together. The Almighty Father, we confess that you are the fairest of all. So please, let us be still before you. Let us be still through our prayer. And we like to take refuge in you. So please let us in, and please give us those ultimate salvation that you promised. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.